Well, hello and welcome to today's web seminar, The Future of Artificial Intelligence and Testing. Will you have a job tomorrow? Sponsored by Kobiton. And we're featuring speakers Frank Moyer, the CTO at Kobiton, Joe Colantonio, founder of Test Talk Spot podcast and Guild conferences, Mush Honda, VP of Testing at KMS Technology, and Drew Williams, the marketing manager at Kobiton. I'm your TechWell host and moderator, Ken Whitaker. Thank you for joining us today. Before I hand it off to the speakers, let me explain the console. The three panels on your screen can be moved around and resized to your liking. At the bottom of your console is a widget toolbar. By clicking the handouts widget in the middle, it looks like a piece of paper. You can download a PDF of the speaker slides. If you experience any technical issues, please let us know by typing in the questions and answers panel to your left. This is also how you submit questions, which will be queued up at our Q&A session at the end. So feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation. Finally, to optimize your bandwidth for the best viewing experience, please close any unnecessary apps you have running on your system. This event is being recorded and will be made available to watch on demand. Once the recording's ready, you'll get an email with instructions about how to access the presentation. With that, I'd like to hand it over first to Frank Moyer.
Thank you very much, Ken. I appreciate it, and thank you all for attending this webinar. And I'm very pleased to be the first to present. I'm very happy also that this webinar is not live in case you have seen my tweets that went out and decide you want to throw things at me. I'll be far enough away that you won't be able to hit me. But you'll see on your screen, if you move over to the three comments from mine. Let me move that over. Hey, three comments that I would like to cover, and I'll cover those later. And I'd like to start with the opportunity that sits in front of us with machine learning, both the impact this technology will have on our daily lives and also the impact it'll have on our careers as testing professionals. Some liken the recent advances in machine learning to the invention of the steam engine or electricity in the Industrial Revolution of the 1800s. You know, at that time, machines were replacing manual labor jobs, doing it more efficiently and at lower cost. And over the long term, the Industrial Revolution led to tremendous improvements in the quality of life. You know, over a 50-year period, the real wage doubled. So the real wage accounting for inflation doubled. And a lot of that was due to the efficiencies gained through the Industrial Revolution. However, in the short term, you know, there were some big impacts. Unemployment skyrocketed. Exact numbers are tough to come by, but the estimates are between 25 to 50% unemployment, especially in those whose jobs were being replaced by machines. Over time, those unemployment numbers returned to lower levels as these manual laborers reskilled and found new jobs. I believe machine learning will be significantly different than the Industrial Revolution. I think it's going to have a much greater positive impact on our spending power, but more importantly, unlike the Industrial Revolution where the machine took over the job of the human, machine learning provides us testing professionals with the ability to work in tandem with the machine to make us better testing professionals and improve the quality of our end product. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this concept of working in tandem with the machine, and where the machine learning and the professional working together to improve the productivity of the professional task. And this is sometimes referred to as intelligence augmentation. Unlike some machine learning that you may have heard about, like autonomous driving, where some say will replace people who drive as a profession, industries like testing will advance by intelligence augmentation. In a presentation, a good example of this outside of the testing space was a presentation done by Nikolai Wadstrom and one of the portfolio companies, Sibley. They have a mobile app that helps audiences find affordable and effective mental health coaching through conversation. So this AI platform takes all this conversation data and offers suggestions to the mental health coaches of Sibley to help them build a consistent message over time. So these coaches aren't licensed therapists, but they're trained continually by the machine. And if we look at the testing today, let's face it, testing budgets are tight. Development is pushing new releases at a blistering pace, and it's impossible as testers for us to keep up. We will be able to do more with less by pairing testing professionals with machine learning capabilities to drive this future of testing intelligence augmentation. And if you look at, we're already beginning to see this in action. Applitools Eyes, which is a product in the market today, takes human annotations, tester annotations, on the user interface that as input to train the machine learning algorithm to make it better. It reduces the amount of time that the testing professional has to spend on verifying how a mobile application renders on different screen resolutions. So, a very difficult task and time-consuming task for a human to do, a very effective way for a machine or a computer to do that same process. I'd also like to just clarify when I look at intelligence augmentation and expand upon that a little more, because it goes beyond the scope, in my opinion, of a single organization. It goes, eventually we will all participate in a testing matrix where intelligence gathered from one organization will help improve the quality of tests for other organizations. And we're seeing early signs of this already happening. Jason Arbon, who is the CEO and founder of Test AI, presented at a TechWell event in Las Vegas in June, and they crawled 30,000 apps from the App Store and used a type of machine learning algorithm called reinforcement learning to train the machine on what the login to an application generally looks like. And so, there are a few different types of logins that you see in an app: one-time passcode, two-factor authentication, username and password. It learned and generalized those types of logins so that now you don't need to write any scripts for login. You can simply have the machine know from its wealth of knowledge how to test that flow. And I think it also goes beyond the scope of just test data. The data that can be pulled from other parts of the organization can identify cross-correlation. So there's valuable information from Google Analytics that we can now tap into our testing to drive from test coverage to user coverage, which is really what matters most. So finally, where does this lead us? From a workflow perspective, the professional tester will focus on the parts of testing that are most difficult for a machine to do: running exploratory tests, validating and correcting the decisions made by the machine, overseeing and directing the work done by the machine, and then analyzing the anomalies identified by the machine. And the machine will be given tasks that it does really well: comparing screenshot images, identifying and advising the tester on flows that should be explored, analyzing the exhaust from test executions. And the amount of data that will come out of our tests will grow exponentially over the upcoming years, and identify anomalies that need to be analyzed. At a macro level, this will overall drive a greater quality product and less frustration from testers doing their job. Machine learning will drive change to what manual testers do today. Back to my Three comments here. Executing rote tasks will be performed by machines. And the testing professionals will advance their careers onto more professional and human-related tasks. On the Kobiton side, we are launching a product called Application Health Check that is not meant to replace existing testing processes, but rather augment the existing testing process. One of our professional testers executes a test against a single device, and when we use that single device execution to then run the test across a multitude of devices, reporting back different facets of the application, including user interface issues, performance issues. If the system is crashing, we'll provide crash logs, and then system metrics like battery, network, CPU, and memory usage. So that is all for me. I'm entertaining questions and comments from the panel.
Awesome. Thanks, Frank. This is Drew with Kobiton, the marketing manager. Again, Mush or Joe, if you guys have any rebuttal, opposing views on anything Frank said, please feel free to go ahead and share now.
Well, I was just going to say, I think
So
just the
I
first
definitely-
Good, Mush.
Go ahead, Joe.
No, I was just going to say, I agree with a lot of what Frank said. It's just, I think a lot of people, when they see this first bullet point, 80% of manual tests will be replaced, are going to really get upset. I don't know this is necessarily true, this wording. I think testers do a lot of activities. Some of them are manual, some of them are automated. I think more it's going to be man and machine helping each other rather than just being replaced completely by the technology.
I think that's right. I think it's, maybe it should have been 80% of manual testing instead of testers.
Right.
Right.
Because I already know that Frank said it
sort
caused an issue. Sorry again.
Yeah, my only thing with some of the quotes that Frank had was, and something that he mentioned also, right, where I think it's important to also understand what testing would be, right? A lot of what the tools currently are doing, like visual reviews, as a tester, I typically consider them as checks that are definitely mundane, and essentially, testers get bored doing the same thing, and just as a human, you begin overlooking that. So I definitely agree that those sorts of checks and repetitive work will be something that just like automation tools of today, the algorithms will help us overcome that and supplement what we do. I definitely agree with the message here that it's going to be in tandem with what testers bring to the table and what we collaborate with and work on for basically increasing the overall confidence and hence the quality of the applications that get delivered. So I'm on this one with Joe that not all of the testers are going to be replaced, but a lot of the mundane and repetitive stuff. Definitely, there'll be a smarter way of allowing us as testers to not have to worry about all of that in the future.
Yeah, I think one thing I'd like to, before we go to the next, I think we want to cover during this conversation is what organizations can do to prepare for this change. The companies that succeeded during the Industrial Revolution, even during the advancement of computers and the internet, those are the ones who embrace the technology change. And how can we as organizations embrace this in the right way so that we improve the overall quality of our product faster than our competition?
So asking this question to everyone attending the webinar currently, would your managers prefer to invest in humans or AI? And I'll give you all about 25 to 30 seconds to answer that question. Okay, so it looks like the majority of people think that whether or not the managers would prefer to invest in humans or AI completely depends on how the team progresses compared to the advancements in artificial intelligence and machine learning technology. Something we definitely expected.
So I would just agree with that poll. I think it's pretty accurate for what I've heard from speaking with a lot of people. I think though, like as Frank said, that as testers, we can't hide and think that we're some sort of special talent that can't be replaced, some of the activities, and not to be afraid of that, to embrace change and really keep our skills up to date and not be afraid of technology, to actually go out and find this technology, try to implement it within our companies to make the what we're doing better and more reliable. And I think that way we could always grow along with the technology rather than just ignoring it and telling our management what needs to be done rather than waiting from them to tell us what needs to be done, so we can educate them what really needs to be done so they're not buying into all this hype. I'm not sure if you agree with that or not on that poll.
Yeah, I mirror that. To me, just being able to say, well, it depends, basically, to say that, we possess some special skill that cannot be replaced. It's just like saying, what if a better tester with more exposure and more real world, acquired domain and experience comes in with a better idea, right? It's very similar to that. And as Joe, you mentioned, there are several techniques that we should be doing. First of them is that acknowledgement and embracement of looking at machine learning and all of these as enablers rather than inhibitors, right? Or basically looking at it of saying, hey, this is something that is going to completely take over. But there are some things that I refuse to change for, and I'm are things that I can do much better. In the current state of things where machine learning is, absolutely it's in its infancy relative to where testing and other automation tools are. But just thinking about it where it's not going to mature and be able to be adopted by us as testers would definitely be wrong.
Okay, great. So I think we're all pretty much in agreement that I don't think AI is going to replace testers. I guess it all depends on how you define what a tester is. When I think of a tester, I think of a domain expert, and I don't see that being replaced anytime soon. But I think a lot of the testers' activities, as Frank had pointed out, are going to change. And we really need to embrace that. I remember as a kid, if someone told me a computer could beat someone in chess, I would have said they were crazy. But sure enough, a computer beat someone at chess, right? And then we keep moving the poll. We go, well, they'll never learn how to drive. We don't have to worry about that. Once again, we're using machine learning and AI to do the driving for us. So we really need to be careful that we don't hide our heads in the sand and think that what we do is so unique that it can't be replaced. But I think there are certain activities that we do that can't be replaced, like creativity and also being domain experts. So I just think something to be aware of. I think a recent example of this is in Detroit, where they make the most cars in the world back in the day. And in the 70s and 80s, if you ask them, do you think a robot would replace you? They would say, no, that's impossible. And of course, now I would think probably a majority of the cars created or put together or assembled are by robots. So if these people knew this ahead of time and they embraced robotics and learned robotics, rather than fight it or to say it would never happen, they'd be in a better place. So I think we should just learn from history. I think a lot of this is hype right now, so I'm not saying that AI is going to replace anything, but just be aware, keep your ears open, and constantly evolve with the technology, and try to learn what's real and what's not, and how you can actually benefit from it. And so along those lines, a lot of people think that AI is it really real? Is it hype, or is it the real deal? And I think that right now, a lot of companies are getting funded by anything that has the term AI in it. You could see it already. Some big companies out there already getting funded by Google, a lot of first-round funding. So you need to follow the money. So obviously there's investors believing in the technology, but you also need to remember that vendors may be hyping up some of the tools right now. If you tried some of them right now that are out there, they're great, but they don't necessarily do what you think they're going to do. So, I mean, just based on that first iteration, I don't see testers getting replaced, anytime soon at all. So just something to be aware of, that a lot of it is hype, but a lot of it's not. So there's a lot of cool stuff out there. I think what people get hung up on are there are really two definitions for AI, and a lot of people go to the first one where they think of HAL in 2001, where they think it's an omniscient, artificial intelligent machine that could pass a Turing test, and that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking more about machine learning, and machine learning is more of a statistic kind of thing that it does that you need to train. So it's more of a science of getting computers to act without being explicitly programmed. And if a program can improve based on a task, based on its experience, then it can improve itself and learn. That's the type of technology we're talking about. It's more machine-based, machine learning type technology. So once you get that definition in place, I think you can kind of not get all bought into the hype and go, okay, it's machine learning, it's statistics. As Frank mentioned, we're delivering software quicker, faster and faster. We have all this data. So what's great about machine learning, it is made perfectly for analyzing this data. So as we start pushing things into production, I see a lot of technologies being able to analyze how our build is acting in the wild before our users find issues, and then be able to modify itself or roll back automatically. So those are the types of benefits I see from machine learning. Also, once again, Frank mentioned visual testing. I think visual testing is actually a great example of how man and machine can work together. So with visual testing, basically it takes images of your application, and then when it finds a difference, it bubbles that up as an insight, but it takes a user to actually look at that data and say, is that a real issue? So it's the machine triggering it and giving you an insight, hey, this doesn't look right, this has changed over time, but it takes a human to actually look and say, oh, is this a bug, or is this a part of it's a new release that, of course, it's acting this way? So definitely agree that it can help us in that way. Also, there's things like crawling, where the technology can crawl your website and give you some insight onto maybe some test areas that you may not have coverage for already. So that's definitely, once again, being able to run a test in the background over and over again, have it learn your application for you, and maybe be able to analyze, maybe some gaps that you may not have noticed as a tester. And then you as a tester decide, well, this path is irrelevant. I don't want to spend time on it. Or, hey, I missed this actual path that really makes sense. So that's another use of AI that I think is going to help us with these tools. So I think they're a real deal. I just think a lot of them are overhyped. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of things that can help us with already. Also being able, like I said, to run tests. I don't know about you, but when I get a new build, a lot of times everyone's like, oh, run everything. Well, if something fails, how do I know it actually correlates to what's been changed? So it's not very strategic. So if you're doing continuous integration and continuous testing, you're probably generating a bunch of data from your test runs. But who has time to really go through all that data? And I think really machine learning is perfect for that scenario. It can analyze the build. It could look what's been checked in. It could see what modules have been touched. And based on that, it could tell you, okay, here are these 8 to 10 tests you should run to actually explore these paths that were actually changed. And what I love about that is it's strategic and it's atomic. So if something fails, it's a real failure and not just noise, rather than just run everything. Also, like I said, this cool spidering technology that can go through your application. It could find paths you may not be aware of, is really cool. And really what these tools do is, like I said, it gives you insight. So it uses data over time to say, hey, this image looks different. Is this a real issue? And you as a human have to go and say, oh, I didn't notice that. That is a real bug. Or my performance. What's cool, a lot of these things keep track of performance over time. And it can tell you for the past month, this function took, 3 seconds to run. But now with this latest build, it's taken, 20 seconds. So those are cool insights. Those type of tools right now can start bubbling up to you and let you know, hey, there's an issue. Let's check this out and see if there's actually something there. And you as a tester then need to go in and look at it. So I think that's really critical that you remember that it's really man and machine working together. It's not being replaced. It's actually pretty much our jobs as domain experts being the same, but newer probably skills we need, especially like training this algorithm. Before an algorithm goes live, you need to train it with some test data, make sure it's actually doing what it's doing and verifying that. So stuff like that definitely is going to be, I think, a big growth area. So anything in data science is going to be helpful. So I think those types of things really are going to change automation landscape as we know it. And as I said right now, if you use any of these tools, they're great. But if you could tell, I wouldn't be scared. I'm not scared right now of any of them replacing me. It's just that a lot of the things we do are going to change, and that we really need to adapt and really incorporate them into our current environments and learn what they can actually do and leverage them to help us. But it's not necessarily going to replace us. So I wouldn't be scared of that at all. And there's a lot of things, like I said, with machine learning where it can actually learn from our stuff and give us awesome insight as testers that can help us with our other testing activities. So definitely a lot of stuff going on that I think is going to be helpful in this domain for sure. I did an actually online conference called AI Summit Guild, where I had some sessions specifically on AI automation and what the experts thought it was going to affect the testing area, and all of them agreed that same thing. It's really going to be man and machine, and that there's really nothing to be afraid of. That it's really just a change, and just to be aware of it and know that this change is happening. Not to ignore the change, to adapt, but to really embrace it and get better testing overall in the long run by leveraging it already. So those are my main points. I didn't know if anyone like Frank or Mush wanted to jump in and correct me or agree with anything.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much, Joey. This is Frank. I think one of the keys that you called out that I'd like to emphasize is this concept of anomaly detection. Right? It's the sort of a low-hanging fruit with regards to machine learning, and something that can be implemented quite easily because it really doesn't compete with the tester's current jobs, right? The amount of data that needs to be sifted through is overwhelming, and being able to identify anomalies is very a very difficult job for a human to do, very easy for a machine to do. And when you look at like performance data or battery usage, CPU, memory on the device, all these factors that go into the quality of your application, it's a great piece of technology that can be used today. And we use it in our health check process. We use a good amount of anomaly detection to determine when certain devices, we test on real devices to identify when certain devices are performing slower than other devices and by an unacceptable level.
Right. Frank, you just reminded me of another point I forgot to make. Like you said, it can notice changes, but also as automation engineers, how many times have you run a script and it broke because someone changed the ID? You spend a lot of time with maintenance doing these updates. Well, with machine learning, with these types of tools, they can actually identify fields and elements and self-correct themselves. So based on, hey, this particular path isn't available, but I know it's near this and that and this coordinate, and it's able to identify the IDs dynamically at runtime for you. So it's going to help with a lot of maintenance and reliability. So rather than replace someone that's a manual tester, which, like I said, a tester is a tester, I think it's going to really take care of a lot of things that an automation engineer would have to focus on right now.
It's a great point. And it's interesting to see the market attacking artificial intelligence and testing from a few different aspects. Test.im is doing a lot in that space with regards to flaky tests, having a auto-healing test execution or self-healing automation tests. And I think that is going to be a huge time saving, and it's also probably one of the most frustrating jobs of an automation tester is to figure out why this damn thing didn't work.
Right, absolutely.
So one quick comment that I'd make to the conversation that you guys are definitely in sync with is that essentially insights and partnership that machine learning offers to testers, right? If you think about it, the way I look at all of this is the preemptiveness, right? Is what can I be told before I go heads down into trying to either figure out what is wrong and realize down the road that I've spent my effort in the wrong direction, perhaps, and I could have used it more effectively or efficiently in trying to identify other more critical areas that I may have overlooked? Or is it more about just the mundane maintenance aspect, as Frank, you were mentioning, with the execution brittleness of reruns and recoveries necessary in automation.
Yeah, and Mush, I think this is an interesting point when it comes to machine learning, and in that the training part, it's really important for those training cycles to be very short. You use the phrase "going down the path," and how if you don't, if your feedback loop is a week, then you could end up going down the wrong path for a week. If your feedback loop is an hour, it has a huge impact, and it'll be interesting to see how the tools advance in this regard. With Applitools, there's a feedback mechanism, but that feedback mechanism is after the test is executed. There can be shorter cycles to reduce the likelihood that you go down the wrong path for too long.
Right. Yep. And to your point, that's all of the preemptiveness that comes in, and the sooner we have that, even before you begin, right? Of saying, the example I would use is as a tester, if somebody told me based on a certain change that a developer has made, what statistical probabilities can they show that there is a likelihood of some impact or a potential bug that might be introduced, right? And that sort of goes even beyond just being able to execute automatically within testing, right? This is more also about even the choices that are made possible, or the testers made aware of, to say, hey, just so you know, this might be something that you want to look at, right? And it comes back to just the going through of all of the data, right, that has been collected over time.
Agreed. Test prioritization is really important when you've got limited resources, which is where we all are.
Okay, so where will artificial intelligence / machine learning fail to mimic the value of human interaction? Is that going to be in the creativity department, exploration, understanding business context, analysis, or application of knowledge? Okay, so where will artificial intelligence / machine learning fail to mimic the value of human interaction, that is? It looks like the majority, 56% of everyone has said creativity, followed by understanding business context. Would any of the panelists like to touch on that a bit before we move on to Mush's segment?
So I'd like to first say that I think creativity definitely is something that us as humans bring in. My personal opinion also is exploration is something that would not be able to be replaced anytime soon. And the reason why I say that is, to me, exploration is actually something that is built on the domain and the business context. And being someone from the context-driven mindset of testing, I would say exploration is where you're not essentially teaching the testers or looking at scenarios from a step-by-step process, right? It's more about, here's the business domain, here's the context of what you're trying to achieve. Go in the application and figure out what ways you can achieve those goals. And as a exploratory tester, if I feel that given the data that I'm using, or a variation of different situations and circumstantial settings, if I need to drill in and further exploit or explore a particular area of the system under test, being able to have that driven purely from machine learning, especially the supervised learning algorithms, would be a bit more difficult. So I definitely agree the creativity would be on top of my list personally, and I would also rate exploration a bit higher than what I see in the results.
I was just going to say I definitely agree with creativity. Like I said, I speak with a lot of folks on my podcast, and a lot of them mention with AI that creativity is probably the area that's going to be the least likely to be disrupted by AI. So it's all, and I don't, I think people really underestimate it. So it is one of those skills that we should be focusing on more, for sure.
Yeah, I think creativity is high on the list. I think that there is probably a component here that hasn't been asked, which is I put pretty high up there as well, next to creativity, and that's really the identification of and review of what the machine does. There's that's sort of obvious, right? The machine can't review what the machine's doing. You can use some types of machine learning models do that, but the human needs to be there to oversee the machine.
Cool. So, as we've all talked about, I think we're in agreement that this is something that will definitely, I feel is going to be an enabler, right? So the obvious question that typically comes in the mind of a tester would be, hey, where in all of these different situations that we talk about, where is this going to be sort of giving me the best bang for an ROI, right? On the investment that I potentially make in training the algorithms and the tools that use these algorithms. What, how does it make my job and my responsibility as a tester better, in a sense, right? And the way I look at it, and I touched on it briefly before, was the preemptiveness, right? I feel that the machine learning options that are coming up in the tools, I feel would be the most suited for testers if there was a way for them to be able to give us preemptive recommendations, right? As Frank was mentioning, right? Looking at the execution of all of the testing that has happened, whether it's through manual interactions or through automation tools, be able to give us an assessment of saying, given all of the changes that have been done in this release per se, you have executed these tests. However, this area of the application seems to have been touched the least, and based on prior data, there's been some critical bugs that are typically there. Tools that are set up to allow us to be able to analyze that sort of data and be able to advise us preemptively before a lot of effort and energy goes into the actual execution of testing would be the maximum add-on. The other area that I see also is being able to leverage tools that help reduce the execution brittleness, where you're almost in a reactive mode, right? When something fails, what is your confidence in the fact that the failure is truly driven by an actual defect that has been observed in the system versus it being related to the brittleness of a test script or an automation script, right? And how soon can tools that encounter such brittleness recover and continue on testing, right? In the current state of affairs, typically a lot of teams run a lot of automated regression tests, which even though we want them to be run quicker and be on demand, does take some time. I've known where teams actually leave them running overnight just because of the complexity of the application or just how vast the application is. Being able to not have to watch for error messages hitting our inbox in the middle of the night saying that something is wrong versus having the tool make some assessment and say, yes, we were able to recover and rerun and overcome that hurdle, where just the confidence in the entire execution and the tasks and activities of the testing tools, the testing team, that value would be something that I see machine learning and AI adding significantly to. The other aspect of what we've also talked about today has been, how do you train the machines to actually adopt these algorithms, right? How do you do the supervised learning? How do you reinforce this learning, right? All of that is what I believe is something that us as testers need to look at it and need to adopt. I know Joe also talked about the being more familiar with the role of what data scientists play these days, right? Would there be a way for us to get more involved and understand a little bit of the prediction models and things of that nature that we can then leverage and be accustomed with, so that way we can apply that and use it to train the machines and the algorithms to be able to be more effective, right? I know, speaking of the Automation Guild, Joe, I was actually in one of the sessions where one of the testers talked about this tool called Weka from the University of New Zealand, which is more of a data analysis tool. But that tool, just based on being able to create, logic to allow us to parse through a lot of defects reported historically on a particular application. That allows us to sort of make those preemptive recommendations or suggestions of saying, hey, what are the chances that there's a bug that is identified when you have a certain feature that has been updated over the last period of 6 months or 6 weeks or 6 days. But tools like that are something that us as testers should definitely try to adopt and learn and be able to apply to make our analysis and assessments of the situations that we're going to apply for testing to be able to make more of an informed decision there. Thinking about what to do in terms of preparing for it, I would say, look at the tasks rather than just the execution of testing. I would say you should, as a tester, look at all of this assessments that you do, right? If you were to train a new member who joins your team to be able to, take on the same responsibilities and be a good tester within the team, what are some of the thought process and the risk analysis that you do? If there's a way to actually try to take a granular deep dive and say, here are the 4 or 5 things that I always look for, and then just try to see if there are tools out there that you can model these on, would be something that I would say should be part of initiatives for any testing team, especially supporting the demand of today, which is speed being the #1 thing for time to market for applications, right? And then finally, the other thing I think about also with as a tester, especially, is I look at all of the machine learning tools and the upcoming AI tool sets as just enablers, similar to what automation tools of today are, right? I remember very distinctly several years ago when the concept of automation tools came in, we were having a very similar conversation where everybody thought that, oh, the days of testers are over. We now have tools that can go through and do the automation. But just like the role of a tester evolved into now also being able to be a software developer in test, right, or a software engineer in test, right? It's going to follow a similar pattern where we understanding how to train and use mathematical models to be able to effectively scrutinize and make sure that the algorithms that are providing us with either results or recommendations have a good bearing of the same thought process that we use as testers to make that risk assessment. Would it completely eliminate defects? I think that's another conversation that we should be having and should be thinking about. I don't believe that would be a case. I think what will happen is the outcome of using ML-based tools or any automation tool is to just catch the defects and be aware of them sooner, so that way we can try and avoid them. are all items that are included in applications that are not built with its intent? Are they all critical to fix? Maybe not, right? There can be another discussion about, do you want an application with zero defects if the industry or the particular application of it does not warrant it, or is there more flexibility about that severity of the defect? But my take on it is, us as testers, whether you're a engineer-based tester where you're more hands-on with automation and scripting, do you not look at ML tools? I would say, whether you are or not an automation guy or a person, you definitely have to adopt these tools and just look at it as another way that will make your tasks simpler and let you really focus on other activities that, such as creativity and things of that nature to be able to be applied when you are testing a system.
I'm going to hone in on the factors in deciding what machine learning tools. I think the prioritization here is really important. Going after the lower hanging fruit capabilities and not trying to boil the ocean when you're adopting machine learning into your organization. Do a lot of investigation, a lot of research. I'd go after the anomaly detection, the parts of the testing process that you can augment your existing process easily instead of trying to uplift and completely overturn your existing process.
No, yeah, I completely agree with that. And like we mentioned earlier, with the test data we have with our continuous delivery and our continuous running of our tests, a lot of times to find out what caused the issue, a new build is already running and we don't have time to debug what happened previously. So using ML type learning to find out really quick to bubble up those instances without us looking through it. Like Mush said, being emailed late at night what happened, I think it'd be a big benefit to us.
So we're ready to present questions to the panel. The first one is, what AI ML tool players would you recommend for the build detecting the test coverage based on change?
I know one tool out there that's kind of doing this. It's called C-Lights. I'm not endorsing any tool, but that's just one tool I know that when you check in a build, it's able to know what's changed and also tell you what tests you need to run to do that mapping against it. So it's fairly new that I've been checking out. And I think that'd be help tell you what the test coverage is on each change that your developers are checking in as well. So
with the advent of DevOps and with API testing becoming needed based on the advent of microservices and containerization, AI and the need to keep up with development in these architectures, what's the input on AI and its ability to create the needed CI/CD velocity for testing?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, because what's happening right now, you've got development moving so quickly. You've got the likes of Kubernetes and Docker that are making the process more easy to deploy. The testing needs to mimic the deployment in many ways. The ability to test your APIs separate from the front end, in addition to the front end, is a key component. So when you have implemented one of the most common CI/CD tools for containers is a product called Drone, or if you use something like Jenkins, to be able to integrate that with your CI/CD pipeline, deploy to, if you've got a mobile app, deploy to real devices and run your tests quickly and feed that back so that it's all automated.
What articles, books, or websites do you suggest to help us in the understanding of the current state of the art in AI testing?
I was actually gonna take that one and say, hey, you got to start following Joe's website and all of the automation guilds and the online conferences. But Another one that I would recommend also is aitesting.org. And that's something that is really great. I am a member of that group as well. Diligently follow that. But it's started by Jason Arbon and Tariq King, who I think have been part of your conferences, Joe.
Yeah, I was going to mention this is a great group to join for really deep thinking and getting together to find out what's emerging in the AI field. Is at aitesting.org. Also, a shout out to MIT Technology Review. They almost always every month have articles on AI and robotics, not necessarily towards testing, but just in general. And also SD Times, Software Development Magazine, which I get every month, always has something with AI as well. They have a really good article last month on API testing with AI. So a lot of good stuff there. And sorry, one other book, What to Do When Machines Do Everything, is a book that was at my conference, brought up a lot on where they see AI going, and it has a really good statistics there and also projections on where they think jobs are heading. I forgot to mention this one statistic that although 12% of jobs probably will be replaced, they say that 75% of jobs will be enhanced and 13 will be invented. So 13% of jobs will be here that we don't even know of. So there's a lot of exciting things happening in this area.
Well, Joe, that's really good news for all of us. So, okay, I'd like to bring up a similar question. What do you think is the best training for testers to move to this in the future?
I'm just going to say, guys, that self-learning about data science online definitely is the resource to go. I personally am learning on Udemy, on DataCamp. There's also articles and a group called Analytics Vidya, which is a website out of India that has a very strong following. Where they talk about a lot of libraries in Python and R that are being developed and made available for testers.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of resources out there. There's MIT OpenCourseWare, which has a lot of the computer science online. I think they have something on machine learning. Also, like Mush mentioned, Python, I think, is very easy to learn. And if you can learn Python, there's a lot of modules you can use to kind of get your hands dirty with some of these algorithms. I'm really a hands-on approach type guy to continually be learning. So that's probably my best resources for that.
Okay, great. We have time for just one more question. I really like this one. What are some things I can do as a tester to ensure my value against AI and ML tools replacing most of my job function?
I think you're a leader. As a tester, you're a leader, and it's up to you to tell management what's true and what's not. And so to just take the initiative, you can't imagine how many good manual testers, used to be just called manual testers, that lost their jobs because they didn't just even adapt a little to open their minds and say, maybe I can leverage a tool to help me with testing. So just to keep an open mind, to really take that leading role, and to really do little proof of concepts along the way to lead your team to say, hey, do you know there's a technology? Let's check this out. Really be that catalyst for your teams to embrace this newer technology. I think if you do that and you're always looking to improve and make the company better, faster, more efficient, the better off everyone's going to be.
Yeah, and I'd like to add on to that and say that also being able to look at this not just from a technology perspective, but also an organizational change perspective, to start to pave the path for what the career looks like for the testing roles going forward, and work with the management to understand the impact that this has on the organization and be that leader that Joe said.
Okay, great. That ends our event for today. On behalf of TechWell, I'd like to thank Joe, Mush, and Frank for their time, and Kobiton for sponsoring this web seminar. Also, a special thanks to you all, the audience, for spending this past hour with us. Have a great day, and we hope to see you at a future TechWell event.